there's a...
What do you mean by information? You're just telling me something about information. What do you mean by information? Because I'm thinking of
Right.
words in a book, or like, I don't know, computer code, or atoms. What is it?
DNA has information in it.
Okay, is there some kind of encompassing definition that covers everything?
It's a good question.
Well, it wouldn't be like the laws of nature, right? I mean, like energy, he kind of compared it to energy, but they say energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but information wouldn't be like energy then, because it would be created, it just could be destroyed.
Information is not energy. Energy is a physical thing.
No, I'm going on what he said. That's what he said earlier. He compared it to energy.
Just in terms of its inability to be destroyed, which was his claim.
Information.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't understand, because...
And I don't think that's true. I think information can be destroyed. Like, I'm pretty sure that there was a book written in the year, 2000 BC or whatever, that was in the Library of Alexandria, which was burned, and no one will ever know what it said ever again. I feel like that information is gone.
I say my Library of Alexandria too, so jinx. Information destroyed forever. There are dead libraries, for example, that are gone. There's all sorts of shit that's been destroyed, information-wise. I mean, even just if I write a grocery list and then I burnt it, right? It's gone.
It's a weird claim. I don't know exactly what it means. My guess is the physicist who said it does, and Mayer does not, as well as he might think.
Maybe we just don't have his definition of information, because I think we have a similar idea of some kind of something, I don't know, either written down or spoken.
Right.
But maybe he's thinking about just I don't know, fucking atoms or something. I don't know.
Maybe the color of water.
No, it's more related to how black holes work, right? So we know things go into black holes, or that's the way we speak about them. And those things are basically not accessible to us anymore because light can't escape the black hole. So I think the idea was, hey, we no longer have access to that thing. We can never again access that thing, or quote unquote that information, right? So some object hits the black hole, it warps, it gets sucked in. We now don't have access to that information. That's how I'm understanding it. And then I think the physicist he mentioned that said, wait a minute, it's possible that instead of it being inaccessible, it just persists as at the event horizon, right? And so it can be reconstructed in a sense, right? Not the physical thing, maybe, but at least the information about that thing. So it's just a question of, is it lost forever to us, right? Because we can no longer access it. You could also talk about kind of the event horizon in the sense of the universe as a whole. There's a boundary by which we no longer have access to beyond that point because we can't, the light will never reach us, right? So it's limited by that. So that's kind of what the question is.
I think I have actually heard somebody talk about that before. That sounds vaguely familiar, the black hole and the information. How does it relate to the other argument, though? Seems is that not just gone off on a?
I missed how he connected it or why it came up. But at least that's the concept. I'm forgetting the physicist's name right now, but it's a very famous position. So. But yeah, I don't see what else it was connected to. I missed.
There's a pinned link. It's not exactly an argument, but it lays out why omniscient minds are impossible. And I actually think that's a pretty good argument for atheism.
You wouldn't have to be omniscient to know that.
No. I know loads of things about being omniscient.
I beg to differ.
Oh, thanks a lot. I know your mama.
Get fucking wrecked, Matt. Now, why don't you read the article? It's actually pretty interesting. Not actually it wouldn't be interesting, but it's pretty interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm inventing a new argument.
Oh, that's more important than like learning shit.
God, so that might be more important than this.
Yeah, let's not learn things. Let's talk about how if atheists exist, God necessarily exists, or whatever the fuck.
No, this is a different argument.
Jack, are you there?
Using the idea of
Jack. Oh, okay. I want to ask
kind of early for Jack. He's probably slow moving.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think I'm aware of a syllogism, but I feel like the idea of just saying an omniscient mind is like logically impossible. Is a pretty good defeater for theism, because unless you're going to say that the God you're going for is not omniscient or is not a mind, most of them seem to, certainly the Abrahamic ones would claim that, right? That they're omniscient minds.
Your mama wouldn't agree to
that.
Yeah, so what do you mean by mind there?
Well, some sort of entity that has mental states.
What does mental states entail? Like, I'm trying to grapple with this.
Thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't see how I can ascribe to that, like, as a Muslim, right? I definitely don't use the word God has or is a mind. And then, so that's why I try to dissect it further and say, what does someone mean? If thoughts means that you are processing information, right, thinking, and you are, like, that sounds like a temporal thing that we're describing. That sounds like there's a state at which you don't know something.
Wait.
Sorry?
What?
It's not
that sounds like a state.
It's not only a temporal thing; it's also a material thing, right?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm asking the question of what it entails. Off the bat, I would say no. I can't ascribe to that because it wouldn't make sense for me to say that. If that's what mind entails, then no. I already don't say that, but I don't even agree with the concept of it.
So, is your God also not omniscient?
No, God is omniscient.
Well, how can you know things without having a mind? I mean, that's how you know things, right? I mean, like a table doesn't know anything, right? So there has to be some sort of consciousness to be like, I know all these things.
He wants to say it's a mind. He wants to say it's a mind by analogy. But let me see if he knows exactly what he's getting at there when he says that.
No, I don't say mind by analogy. I don't say that.
Okay, then what do you say? Are you a Mysterian about God's essence then? About God's ontology?
Yeah, for sure. In the Islamic position, we actually don't speak about God's essence, right? We speak about his attributes and his actions. So we never claim to speak about his essence.
Okay, but in what sense does it make sense to say that I'm a Mysterian about God's ontology, but not about his attributes? So his attributes are a part of his ontology, right?
What do you mean by a part of? Right, they're attributes that will help us understand something about him.
Attributes are features of an entity. Would you agree that? Would you agree to that?
Are you just using features as a synonym to attribute?
Yeah, they are properties of an entity.
Yeah, so I have no problem with attributes of God.
No, but look, this is what you're not understanding. You're a Mysterian about the entity's ontology, but nevertheless, you're not a Mysterian about the attributes of that entity. And I'm saying that that's going to entail contradiction.
Okay,
because if you're a Mysterian, because if you're a Mysterian about the properties of an entity, that entails that you're not a Mysterian about the ontology of the entity, right? Because those attributes take a part of the ontology of the entity. But then, in the same breath, you're saying, I'm a Mysterian about the entities that the ontology... Sorry, I'm a Mysterian about the ontology of the entity, right? And that's going to be a contradiction. So which one is it? Either you're a Mysterian and you don't know anything, you don't make any knowledge claims about the properties of this entity, or you do.
Yeah, so I'm trying to dissect what you're saying, right? To say that I know attributes or properties or an action that an entity occurred, and to not know the ontology of that entity, what is the contradiction in that?
I just told you what it is.
No, you just said it was a contradiction.
Look, yes, I just showed you what the contradiction is. On the one hand, you're saying, I'm a Mysterian about God, right?
Okay,
but then when you make knowledge
claims,
when you make knowledge claims about the supposed properties that God possesses, you're not a Mysterian about God.
Yeah, but that's why I distinguish between what I can say about his attributes and his actions and what I can say about his essence.
No, look, oh my God, how are you not understanding this? You're a Mysterian about God's ontology. When you make knowledge claims about God's attributes, God's attributes are a part of his ontology, of what makes up his existence.
Yeah, so I know about those attributes and not about other things that I don't say about his essence, right? So there's no contradiction in that.
There is I just told you what it is. When you make a knowledge claim about God's properties, when you say that God is omniscient, you're making a statement about God's ontology.
You're not getting anywhere.
But you're also saying that I'm not a Mysterian. That's a contradiction. And you over-talking me. Sorry, you over-talking me isn't showing that your view is coherent. So I don't know why you keep over-talking.
What do you mean by Mysterian?
Look, if you're a Mysterian, supposedly, let's just use the word agnostic because it sounds better here. You want to withhold judgment on God's ontology.
On some part of it,
correct?
Not all of it.
No,
you're making it seem like
God is a mind. God is defined as a disembodied mind, right?
No, that's not how I define
And you wanted to withhold judgment that God has that type of ontology, correct?
No, I said.
But then I asked you, what are the properties that God possesses? One of them being that he's omniscient. And once you do that, you're making a claim about God's ontology. So you're not withholding judgment.
I didn't say I'm withholding judgment about everything regarding God, right? So I think you're trying to say that...
That's not what you said originally. That's not what you said originally.
I don't know if you want to talk past me. That's not what you said originally. If you want to talk past me or if you want to have a conversation, right? We can have a conversation or you could try to talk past me. When I said originally, I said clearly what I said. I said I know about God through his attributes and his actions. I don't claim to know about his essence in entirety. If I didn't clarify that,
you didn't clarify that. You said I don't know about his essence,
no problem.
But I make. So that's not what you said. So now you're lying. So now you're lying through your teeth. So I'll repeat it again for you if you didn't hear what I said.
So did you hear what I said?
You didn't state clearly. You didn't state clearly that you were an agnostic about certain aspects of God's essence. You didn't specify that.
That is clearly the point of saying I know God through his attributes and actions and do not claim to know the entirety of his essence.
But you didn't claim that before. You never said anything that you don't claim the entirety of his essence.
If you repeat yourself 17 more times, I feel like we'll benefit from this because you've only repeated yourself 16 times so far.
What the fuck is talking?
Stay out of that. Just let them do it.
I'm saying it's the same thing. So now he understands that when someone says, I know some things, but not all things, they're not claiming that they know all things and not all things and some things.
So do you agree that before you misspoke and now you have to retract your previous claim?
I mean, it's irrelevant to me how you want to approach this conversation.
How is it irrelevant? Before,
I didn't misspeak. If you didn't understand what I...
And now you have to revise it.
It doesn't make sense to
now that you have to. Now that you've shown what the contradiction is, now you have to narrow your claim to something.
No, the contradiction would have been if I had said I know nothing about God and I know something about God. That's the contradiction that you're trying to present.
Yes, and I was pointing that out. I was pointing that out until you had to revise your view into something weaker by saying that you don't know.
If you're not
you don't know the entirety of God's essence.
If you're not going to let me finish speaking, then we can't have a conversation. if you're not going to let me finish speaking, then we can't have a conversation. So when I'm done speaking, I'm going to mute my mic, then you can speak.
Okay, yeah,
My
okay,
very first
fine,
statement.
fine,
My very
fine.
first
See,
statement.
this is what
My
this
very
is what
first
you
statement.
do exactly when you're
My very
cornered,
first
and
Can we have
then
some
you just
moderation,
narrow your
please?
claim. You narrow your claim to
Let me know
something
if you guys want to
weaker
moderate this or not.
because you can't defend your
I
original
didn't narrow
claim.
the
So
claim
that's
to
why you have to
anything. I
retract it,
clarified
right?
for you what you
Turns
didn't
talking,
understand.
guys. Take turns.
Thank you. So now when I'm done speaking, then you can speak. So what I
Why
said
do you
from the
allow
beginning,
this garbage? This
what
guy
I
is
said
just
from the
gonna be
beginning.
in here contradicting himself,
So
and
am I gonna speak or
when
not?
he's caught
Is someone gonna?
with
I
his
mean,
pants
your
down,
claim
and I
of
give him the
all these claims that
contradiction,
you're
this
making are
piece of
silly.
shit has to retract his.
Yeah, so that clearly from the very beginning, I didn't accept the claim of contradiction because I knew what I said, and it was clear what I said.
No, you lying snake. That's not what you said.
All right. Anyways,
that's not
if
what
you
you
don't
said
understand
originally.
That's fine. And
You didn't
it's been
say
clarified for you.
that you were agnostic about God's essence in entirety. What a fucking moron you are.
The statement that I know something about God.
No, I'm done.
Know,
I'm done with
am I
you.
gonna
I'm
finish
done
speaking
with
or
you.
not?
I already caught
Okay,
you with the contradiction,
stop
and now
speaking.
you have to revise your view because you're a fucking idiot.
All right. I don't know if anyone's gonna mod or not. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
Okay, let's start go, and then and Ariana, so when he's done, please.
Thank you. So the statement that I know something about God, right, was not followed with I know nothing about God. If you don't understand when I say I don't
made it very clear. I made it very clear to you when you make a knowledge claim about God's attributes.
I don't
you
get
would
if
be
he's going to
saying
get
that
muted or he's going to get removed from the stage. I don't know which one's going to happen.
Why do you keep muting?
So when I make this statement, you have to wait till I'm done. The statement that I know something about God regarding his attributes.
Wait.
So the statement that I know some things about God and not his
I already clarified.
That statement does not entail that I know something. I know nothing.
Are we gonna allow this?
That's not.
Just mute the.
It's not me that's muting you. I don't know who's muting you. I didn't mute you. I asked, but will you let Rashad finish?
Like, Rashad hasn't been allowed to speak at any time for longer than 4.5 seconds. This is ridiculous. Just be quiet.
Let him finish or give up, because, like, there's your option. I don't mean give up, I just mean
the claim wasn't confused at all.
Are you going to admit that you had to revise your claim?
Again, I don't get.
Are you going to admit that you had to revise your claim?
You're muting him and he's continuing to interrupt. Move him to the audience, bring him back. Like, moderate the room.
Calm down, James. Okay, Richard, it sounds like you're saying you know something about God, but you don't know everything about God. Is that what you're saying?
That's obviously what I said from the very beginning.
If
that needs to be
you made a claim that you know about God's attributes, which is already making a claim about God's ontology, but then you wanted to say that you withhold judgment on God's ontology, and that's a contradiction.
Not what I said.
That's what you said at the beginning. So when I caught you in that contradiction, for all the idiots here in the room, like you, because you don't know what a contradiction is, you had to revise it to something weaker, and then you said something like, well, I don't know the entirety of God's essence, I just know some of his attributes. That's exactly what...
Can we move on? Or
so not? Are you going to address my argument?
Are you done? I'm waiting for you to be done. So, you're right, Darth. The idiot here that doesn't understand what's being said is you.
The idiot that doesn't understand
so you think that something
is you,
is being...
because you don't understand. You don't understand.
I don't know what the point is.
You don't understand what the contradiction was, so then you had to revise your claim. So then you had to revise your fucking claim, like you always do, right, when you're cornered.
Yeah, if you're an idiot and you don't understand the claim, then ask the question.
Rashad, shut up.
Don't assert
I already showed you what it was.
Don't assert what my claim is.
I already showed you what it was, so now are you going to address me or not?
Alright, anyways.
Alright, there you go. He tapped out.
Tapped out to what? I showed you you're
No,
an
that's
idiot.
ridiculous.
I'm
You didn't
tapping
tap
out.
out your idea.
What is
Hey, he tapped out.
Now,
He tapped out.
now when Haiti
Look at the sound of his voice. Look at the sound. Look at the sound of. Look at the sound of this idiot's.
Look at the sound. 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 Look at the.
James, can you just stop interjecting?
I'm not the one who's being rude.
Yeah, you are. You're interjecting.
Haiti, are you joking? Are you
No,
joking?
I'm not.
Why
This
would
is
you tell
between
James
Rashad.
not to interject when Darth keeps over talking me?
I'm literally
Where were
doing
you?
the same
Where
thing
are
that
you?
you're
Why
doing.
is James getting involved? I don't understand. He's not a mod.
Yeah, well, there's no mod getting involved, and you guys asked him multiple times to stop over talking.
Let him finish. I thought you'd stated your case, and then Irene responded. So where are we now?
Yeah, so I landed on the point.
Hold on.
So this goes back to your question, Haiti. This goes back to your question, Haiti. You said there's a contradiction.
Are you gonna run away?
This goes back to your question, Haiti. So you can continue now. What is the argument
in the meta? Are you gonna object to it or not?
What meta is being engaged in here? I said Haiti asked a question. She said there is a contradiction here. I said that's not our position.
Are you going to deal with the objection or not?
So look, Rashad is saying,
I'm not going to deal with your straw man. God. No, I'm not. I already showed you that you were being an idiot.
So Rashad is saying he doesn't. Are you saying you don't think the God you believe in is a mind or has a mind? Is that what you're saying? Then I asked you, how can you be omniscient?
I'm saying something specific, Haiti. I'm saying, what do you mean by that? If it means the following things, then no, I don't accept that God is those things, that he's having thought.
What my question is how can you be omniscient without having a mind or being...
This cunt doesn't even understand what it is.
I don't think it's appropriate to talk to Haiti that way.
I think he was saying about you.
Christ, Rashad. Come on. So the point here is, the question you're asking, Haiti, is a good question, right? So are you saying omniscience can only be due to a mind?
That's my understanding.
Take a look at how Rashad can answer a very simple question, and he has to defer back to Haiti talking about something.
Well, it was Haiti's argument that you rudely interrupted and misrepresented my view and ended up pointing out a contradiction that doesn't exist in my view, only to make this long rambling about tapping something out. That's what occurred. It was obvious.
Out of your ass.
So I had to clarify you.
I should address him for using the C word, though, because people have been moved off.
Oh, here comes James to help with the meta, guys.
Well, no, I mean, people have been moved off stage from that before for using it, so he shouldn't get a pass because he's got an A on his badge.
God, no, there's no moderation in here. Like, don't expect it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't participate that much, but I did. I'm the guy that muted you, Darth Arianis, because you were interrupting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so once he's not following the guidelines, you got to let him. You got to remove him so we can move the conversation.
People have only been removed from stage for using that word in Hades' room, and this isn't Hades' room, so I don't know why that would have...
James, why do you believe in God?
Rashad can only deal with people who don't give him this type of pushback and don't know
You don't know what pushback is. The only thing you know is shouting and arguing and interrupting.
Shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the idea that you would permit other people to speak is anathema to you.
Are you really?
You are the worst arguer I have ever heard in my entire life.
Are you gonna simp for this camel, Rashad?
You see that racial slur, right? He's made racial remarks like this in the past.
Not good.
I am not Arab. You're such an idiot. I'm not an Arab, right? So your racial slur doesn't follow just because you think Muslims are all Arab, right? You got to stop with this racist remarks. Right, and I don't see why people in the room are accepting of it.
Color of one. Just look at your profile picture.
So the color of my skin is going to determine where I'm from, and that's going to make it okay for you to call me a camel.
I didn't say that. I said that you look like a camel.
Just so I understand, like, is the majority of the room theists right now, or is it atheists?
I think the majority is atheist, and there's at least a few theists here. I'm just saying is that Darth Arianis is a smart guy. He doesn't need to use racial slurs or call him the C word. He could do just fine without that.
What racial slur did he use?
That
you're not familiar with like people.
God is a dishonest.
With people mocking Muslims for their skin tone and throwing out like the term calling them camel or referencing camels.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's very racist.
I've never heard anybody call anybody a camel.
Even Rashad mentioned, why are you using this racial slur?
Well, I expect Rashad to be honest about anything.
It's an obvious racial slur, and he's used it multiple times, right? This is not the first time.
It's
to
a
act like you
racial
don't
slur.
understand, to act like you don't understand this, Scorpion, just shows your own ignorance on the subject. So you don't have to speak if you don't understand it. Just you learned something today now, right? If
I asked for clarification.
Scorpion, so I'm clarifying for you. If someone walks around calling someone who they think is a Muslim a camel, right? Because they might even call, like Darth is such an idiot, he might call a Sikh person a camel as well, just because he thinks that they might be Muslim. And that's the type of idiot that we're dealing with here. Because I don't have an Arab background, so it doesn't make sense to call me a camel. It's the racial slur applied to the wrong person, but it's still a racial slur. And again, I don't know why you're over-talking me, Darth. I know it's hard to hear when you're an idiot, but it doesn't make sense to over-talk.
Tell me all you want, but at the end of the day, you don't have an objection to any one of my arguments, so that's fine.
Yeah, you didn't make any arguments that I was speaking about.
Well, I keep asking James why he believes in God. He doesn't seem to be able to tell me.
Do you mean me? If you have a question for me, I can answer it in about 30 minutes.
No, I was talking about this other guy. He's a lawyer.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I had a question for Rashad, sorry. Well, Godless asked James a question. Let's go with that. She's the attorney.
Well, it looks like he's ignoring me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like more decorum in the room? I apologize.
Will you please debate me, because you're a lawyer. I want to put it, like, lawyer humiliated and destroyed by Godless on my YouTube channel. So can we please debate? Are you scared? Yeah, he's just ignoring me because he's scared, so somebody else can talk.
I just wanted to say hello. I don't know any of you. That is
I had a question for Rashad. You still with us, Rashad?
I'm still here.
So the question I had was, why are you so insistent on not answering Darth? It's just curiosity.
What do you think is the question he asked that I didn't answer?
Sorry, I misspoke. Objection. Yeah, like, why are you so insistent on not
What is
not
his
getting...
objection? Go ahead. I'll follow up with you on it. What's his objection?
Well, the simple fact that, like he had stated earlier, that you contradicted yourself, and now you're trying to revise and trying to remediate what you just told him.
What was my initial contradiction? What was the contradiction? Go ahead, Ren.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, if memory serves, the contradiction went something like, I know God's, properties or whatever, and then you go on to say, well, I only know some of them.
Okay, so what's the contradiction by saying I know some of God's properties?
Well, you said initially that you know them, and then you said, well, I know some of them.
Yeah, so...
You understand what the problem is?
No, Omni, you don't understand what the problem is, right? Darth was trying to pose that I had a different problem in my statement. He was trying to say, by saying I know some of God's attributes and I don't know his essence, that's the equivalent of saying I know something and I know nothing, right? That's what he thought I was saying. He was wrong about that, and I clarified for him.
How are you?
What he wanted to just allow me to finish now. Either move him down from the stage, or I'm not going to waste any more time. So Darth, I already wasted enough time with you. I'm speaking to Omni right now.
There wasn't a contradiction.
So I'm speaking to Omni. You have to. I'm speaking to Omni. So please hold your horses. You'll get a chance to be an idiot again in a second. So Omni, my statement that I know God's attributes and I don't know his essence does not entail that I know nothing about God.
and I clarified that. If it's more helpful, I will say I don't know everything about God.
You said
that's what it means to say.
What the fuck is going on?
Idiot,
I don't get what's going on.
Idiot, you said that you were.
There's like 5 mods here. There's 5 mods here. Is someone going to remove him or not so I can talk to Omni?
Okay.
Oh, I have no problem with Darth interjecting if I misrepresent him. That's all right.
You didn't misrepresent him. You misrepresented my conversation, right? So it's me and you having a conversation now. I don't care what Darth thinks is happening in the conversation.
I don't see why that precludes him from coming in.
Now I explained to you, Omni, right, what my position was, and I added the clarification because it wasn't clear to you in the beginning. You could have asked me. It would have been more reasonable to say that when you say you don't know God's essence, does that mean you know nothing, right? If you would have asked that question, then clearly I would have clarified that no, that's the wrong idea. Because I'm clearly stating that I know something. Again, this is pointless. I can't talk to Omni. I can't talk to Omni if someone keeps jumping in.
When you made a knowledge claim
so the point here, Omni. So the point here, Omni, is
that's
so the point here, Omni.
Fucking moron.
So the point here, Omni, is that my statement is clear, right? And the understanding of that statement you now have as well. That we know some things. That we know some things, and we don't claim to know all things.
I'm gonna repeat it one more time.
So much insulting. Like, why are we doing that?
One more time. Shut the fuck up. I'm gonna repeat it one more time.
All right. Next time someone wants to hold a room like this, please mod, right? I don't know why everyone's afraid of Darth to mod him right now.
You said that you were a Mysterian about God's essence.
No, I didn't.
When you made a knowledge claim about God's property, when you made knowledge, shut the fuck up! Shut up!
We're like
you made a knowledge claim about God's essence. You weren't being a fucking.
Corrupted is just an absolute farce.
Should have just let Darth finish. I'm just saying.
Yeah, thank you. So Omni, now what's the objection, right? What's the objection to someone knowing some things but not all things? Is there a problem? I agree. If someone says, I know some things and I know nothing, that's problematic. I agree. That's not what my original statement was, and that's not what I meant by anything that I said. So there's no confusion about what I said there. If you were confused, you can ask, does it mean that you don't know God's essence? Does that mean you know nothing? And of course, I wouldn't say that because I started by saying, I know something, right? So the question is, do we want to play a game, right, to go around and say, well, this could mean that you know nothing, right, without asking the person, is this what you mean by that?
Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
And the language of essence and attributes.
Why are you talking again when he's responding to you? Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, Scorpion, I'm not talking to you. Omni, if you're responding, go ahead. I didn't hear you speak.
No, all good. Yeah, so from what I was listening to, when you first engaged Darth, it seemed like you were saying, I know God's attributes, and then you said, well, I know some of them. That's why I got that impression.
Yes, my position, the Islamic position, is that we know some of God's attributes, right? When we say we don't know his essence, meaning we don't speak about his essence, is because we distinguish what is God in his essence and what are the attributes that are known to us, right? The attributes will reflect something about God, but we don't call that his essence.
Okay, so, all right, so now that that's out of the way, I suppose the follow-up question would be, you would agree that if someone were to say, I know X about a certain subject, but then they retract it and say, well, I only know some of X regarding a certain subject, you would agree that they're contradicting themselves, right?
If someone were to say, I know... Yeah, exactly. If someone were to say, I know everything, and then I know some things, yeah, they would be correcting what they say. I didn't say I know everything at any point. So that's something I think you misunderstood in the conversation.
That's not quite what I asked. That's not quite what I asked.
Look, if you guys assume that he's saying he knows everything about God's essence, you guys are being an idiot, because no theist ever makes that claim. I mean, this is basic common sense in these discussions. No one would be so vain.
Well, that's a statistical claim, but that's a separate question. But anyway, I don't think that's quite what I was asking.
Excuse me, Omni.
Mm-hmm.
Did Darth get kicked?
So Omni, do you recognize that at no point in this conversation have I ever said that I know everything about God? Do you understand?
It's not quite what I said. I said the impression that I got was you said I know of God's, properties or essence, whatever, and you say, well, I only know of some. You see now how it's sort of looking like you're changing what you're originally stating. You're backing off of what you said.
Okay, so think about the statement you just said. I know of God's attributes. Does that entail that you know all of them?
I don't know, does it?
Well, you're the one interpreting what's being said here, so it seems to you that it means that. Is that the only meaning of I know God's attributes? Yeah, when I say I know God's attributes, I in no way am I saying, or does it entail from that statement that I hold the position that I know all of God's attributes?
Well, yeah, again, this is about your utterances. I don't know what you mean. I know what I mean when I say these things. I don't know what you mean. That's the problem.
Okay, so now you asked me, right? What do you mean when you say you know God's attributes? That's the question you're asking me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is that as a Muslim, we claim to know God through his attributes, some of which are revealed to us. We don't claim to know all of God's attributes, or we don't claim that God is limited by those attributes that we know.
Also, you believe in a different God than I do, but that's all I'll say about that, about Muslims. Thank you.
Well, then what are God's attributes? That's sort of hitching towards that.
Sure, we could talk about what those attributes are, right? The merciful, that's an attribute of God.
I mean, you mean he's like, omnibenevolent? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't say omnibenevolent. I said
that's why I'm asking. I'm not merciful. Saying you said that. I'm asking.
Oh, okay. No, what do you mean by omnibenevolent?
Oh my God, he asks us about every fucking word.
Well, it would be what you mean. If you think God's omnibenevolent, that would be your.
I think.
Yeah, I'm not a theist. I'm asking. I'm just asking Rashad.
So I said he's the merciful. You said, do you mean omnibenevolent? Well, clearly you have an idea of omnibenevolent, and you're asking me if my statement that he is merciful matches what you think omnibenevolent means. I didn't say he's omnibenevolent.
No, I was asking if you think he is. I'm not saying did you say that.
Yeah, so when you ask me if I think he is, then what do you mean by is he omnibenevolent? What do you mean omnibenevolent?
So when I say a being is omnibenevolent, I just take it to mean what they think is morally permissible ought to be all good. Excuse me.
What who thinks is morally permissible? Like what I think is morally permissible?
No, for your deity, your God. He's only going to allow what ought to be done, the morally good in his eyes.
So we distinguish on what that means, right? From our perspective, God will allow something that he has determined as something that shouldn't be done, right? He says to a human, do not do this, but he gives them the choice to either do or not do that thing. So if omnibenevolent means, and this is why I don't use this term, because many people that have used this term are often referring to, or sometimes referring to the idea that God can only allow the good, right? He cannot allow anything to occur that is not good. And and this is a different topic, but we distinguish between what is morality and permission given to humans, what God decrees humans should and shouldn't do, and then what God does as in being God. So we distinguish between.
Sorry, my internet's bugging.
Yeah, so going back to the question of knowing some properties, right? I think Haiti was trying to articulate. She's not here anymore. So someone was trying to say that if God is omniscient. Oh, okay. So yeah, I don't know if I helped clarify for you, Omni, what my position is. I don't know if you still think there's a contradiction in that or not.
Well, No, I'm still stuck on how you can be omniscient and not have a mind or be a mind. Because omniscient means know things, and you'd have to be conscious to know things, right? None of the objects don't know things, right? You need some kind of cognitive, activity.
It's an internal sort of thing, yeah.
That was my confusion.
Yeah, because what it would mean to have a mind is to have a perspective about a world, right?
I suppose you could be like, no, that wouldn't work. Never mind. Yeah, I suppose you could be a computer, but we could just say computers know things, but do they really? I don't know.
Right. So that's a good example. What do we mean by know then?
Justified true belief, just standardly.
Yeah, not everyone holds to justified true belief, though.
I mean, yeah, that's the prerogative, but yeah.
May someone let me know when it's my turn? I'd like to say something to this omnigan.
Well, you need to fix your mic. We can barely hear you.
Well, okay.
I would think, like, in terms of an infallible being, though, we shouldn't be using justified true belief for him, for his knowledge. His knowledge is like 100% certain, so he doesn't need to.
Well, certain, I mean, again, how can you be certain without having consciousness?
Yeah, I agree with
prerequisite. Yeah, it'd be weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with the problem with the Rashad's definitely. I was thinking that. I just didn't want to say that first. I was thinking, if you're not saying it's a mind, is it some kind of robot or some kind of machine? That it's a mind. You might not want to say that so that it might not run into problems analogically that minds have, but it is a mind. It really is.
Well, Rashad, do you think your God is an agent? Has everyone gone quiet? Have I lost connection?
No, I can't.
You're good now. You were bugging out a little bit.
Oh, I asked Rashad if he thinks God is an agent.
Am I better now, or do I need to?
It's a little better. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something off topic to Omni because it was cool. That I got to see the Dragon Ball statues at Comic Con, and it was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that's cool, man.
So can I be moved to the audience? Thank you.
Wait, he has to be moved to the audience?
Yes, please. I just want to listen now.
Okay. You don't hear that a lot.
Yeah, especially as you can't actually usually move yourself to the audience.
Yeah, that he might. Well, if you might not be near a spot.
Yeah, if you're driving or something.
Yeah, it's annoying when you're driving because you don't want to stay unmuted because it's noisy, but you can't keep hitting the phone.
I've heard some Christians say that God is not a mind, actually. Is it the Thomists, some kind of Catholic theology? I think they've seen too that it might run into problems. And they want to be agnostic about what God is in respect to consciousness. Some even say, well, God isn't conscious. I'm not saying God is conscious. I've heard that as well. But
it just doesn't seem to. It doesn't seem to jibe with like the events in the Bible, and well, any of them. There's always some sort of agency and choices being made, judgments, so on and so forth, actions taken.
It's talking
I mean,
to people.
If God's not an agent who flooded the earth,
Yeah, like purpose, intent. All those things are just essential in these Abrahamic faiths. I mean, I can't imagine that someone would say, like a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew would say, that God is not something like a superhuman, right? At the very least. Or, an agent or something even more vague than that. But for heaven's sake, the way that the Bible describes God, I mean, he's described as having emotions and things of that nature.
You wouldn't want to ever use the term superhuman, though.
Well,
because God is uncomparable. We would say like we are created in God's image, but if you try to put the image back on God, you'll be misrepresenting him, and that's not what we want to do.
I want to know how do people then know that God is omniscient? Like, is it because it said so in one of the books, or how do people then know that? If they don't know he's conscious, they don't know he has a mind, they happen to know he's omniscient. How?
I think that would be by thinking and over who God is. What does it mean by God's?
Oh, you're cutting out that. You cut out for the past 15 seconds, I think.
Sorry, I think it's just a lot of us conceptualizing based on what God's given us. Like, what does it mean to be the beginning and the end? What does it mean to have never not existed? What does it mean to seemingly know everything? So I think a lot of this is us applying different thoughts to God. I don't see any problem with that.
Well, the problem with God being omniscient and having feelings is that how would he have feelings if he already knows he's going to have those feelings? Feelings seem spontaneous. It doesn't seem like God could have spontaneous feelings if he knows everything.
I don't think I would say that God knows what he's going to feel before he feels it. I don't think I would take that.
And he's not omniscient.
Then we're using two different definitions of omniscience. If you are saying that your definition means you have to know what you're going to feel before you feel it, I wouldn't use that for God. So now we're
omniscience means you know everything.
No, we would use omniscience in the sense of knowing everything available to know. And in that case, God's future actions before he's decided to do them are not available to know until God has chosen to do those actions.
So you're saying God doesn't know what his own actions are going to be until he does them?
He has to make the choice. God isn't an agent that doesn't have the ability to choose.
That just seems like he's not omniscient then.
I mean, if you're using your definition, which I think is nonsensical, then I don't think that anything could be omniscient by your definition ever. I think it'd just be a nonsense word. But theists, and even how I described it, isn't that way. So it's you can either use the definition and how I laid it out, or you don't have to use the definition, and then we're just done.
Oh, well, I guess you just win, James. Why don't you go feed your chickens or whatever the fuck?
No, that doesn't mean a win. You don't win in conversation. It just means that, like, you're unwilling to budge from your definition.
No, it's nonsensical. Look, even if God doesn't know his emotional states, let's say we grant that, he doesn't know what his emotional states are going to be as a reaction to something, he still knows everything that could happen that could cause an emotional state. So it's still a problem for him to have emotional states if emotions are spontaneous in reactions to things that happen outside of God.
I wasn't completely listening, but I don't understand how an omniscient
I don't think it follows.
being with foreknowledge can even have an emotional state.
Well, that's what I started with, and
James
Cecil pleaded into having that.
Well, look, just because if you react to something, it's usually like a surprise of some sort, right? You can't possibly schedule getting angry next Tuesday at 4:00. You just wouldn't get angry. You get angry because something happens that you weren't expecting or you weren't wanting.
John Lee thinks that God.
You get happy because something happens that you're like, oh, that's great. If you just knew everything that was going to happen, how could you possibly react to anything? It's already happened, really. As far as you're concerned. Well, he couldn't answer it either.
He says God's schedule.
Our God is a different.
What do you mean it couldn't?
Our God is a different concept than what you're doing with John Lee. So you'll have to decide if you want to talk with John.
Well, no, I mean, I think we've talked to John Lee extensively about this, but I mean, just saying God's different. So does that mean his emotional states we just can't understand like how they happen because he's so different from like our emotional states or something?
I think God, because how we're typically described as the image bearers of God, which means that it's like looking at a photograph. The photograph is an image of me. Now you can see emotion on the photo, you can see expression, but the expression and the emotion on the photo is not to the full capable of range of ability that I have. And in the same case, we're images of God, which means that that we have, we can compare a little, but we can't go past.
Did James just cut out, or is it me?
Yeah, James is cutting out from time.
Oh, I muted. I'm trying to make short statements so that you guys don't hear the birds in the background.
Well, I just don't know how that helps because you're just saying we have no idea then. Right. My question was, how can you have an emotional reaction to anything when you're both omniscient and you have foreknowledge? I just don't understand how you can do that.
Well, I wouldn't call it a reaction.
Well, that's what emotional states are.
You may have heard...
John, I'd rather talk to James about it. I've already talked to you about it.
I have a different definition than the one that Scorpion laid out. I don't believe that God knows everything he's going to do before he decides to do it. I think he decided to do it, then he knows the outcome and he knows what's going to happen. So I don't have the potential problem that I think John Lee's model might run into.
Yeah, but James, like, are you saying he doesn't know that he's going to send Jesus until he actually sends Jesus? That doesn't make sense.
So, in Calvin,
James, you're cutting out.
Theology, God did not have to send Jesus. From that action, Jesus came. Jesus was not a necessity. He wasn't like the repent for always, because what that does is if
Hearing everything. You're breaking up, James, but did I actually hear you say God did not have to send Jesus?
I don't understand. Is he just saying God doesn't have foreknowledge or not? Or
God planned to send Jesus before the world was created.
Is he saying? I don't know if he's saying God doesn't have foreknowledge in general, or God doesn't have foreknowledge of his own reactions to things, which
that's what
then would imply. Yeah, but if you have foreknowledge, that would include your own. Like, how could you have foreknowledge and not know how you're going to react to something? That seems weird.
So once you've created free choice beings, you do have the foreknowledge of what those free choice beings are going to do. And then from that, you will have reactions to them, because if you've given people free will and they're not like created robots, as you play out their lives and you play out their decisions, you will see things that you don't like and things that you do like, unless you bite like the causality bullet like John and say that he's the cause almost of everything good and bad.
It doesn't make any sense. If you've got foreknowledge, you know what they're going to do, right? Like if I know my kid's going to like, you know, I never said it did, but if I know my kid's going to like smack his brother next Tuesday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I'm just not going to be in that moment and be like, oh, I'm so angry about it. Because I've already kind of processed it. I know it's going to happen, right? So I would just be sort of like, oh yeah, that happened. I knew that was going to happen and it happened. Okay. Why would I be angry? I already knew, I just don't. The anger is like, I didn't want that to happen. I didn't think it would happen. And then it happened and I'm mad that it happened. So just because humans have free will, it doesn't get away from the problem that God has this foreknowledge and still reacts in some weird emotional way. It just doesn't seem like.
Because we're finite and God's eternal, if God is wanting to convey judgment or wanting to convey mercy or anger to us, then he has to show us an expression of that we can comprehend. And so in the same way, like, I could be finding out that one of my kids did something really bad at camp, and I'm super mad today. And I've had a few days to process it. I've had a few days to know how I'm going to handle it. But now when my kid's there, and they're back home, I need to convey to them just how bad, pushing the other kid in was. Or, just how bad doing this was. And so they will see an expression of my anger.
So God's emotional states are performative.
No, because the anger is still there. There's still things that God is conveying. Like, it doesn't mean that the sin was okay or that this all of a sudden gets a pass. But even if you have, and that's when we get back to the foreknowledge part. Even if you know something's going to happen, it doesn't, like we've all agreed, it doesn't mean causality. Now we've discussed whether or not God has the ability to stop certain things or prevent certain things. Yes, but in the same way, the United States has the ability to stop me from breaking any law by putting a police officer outside my house. They don't necessarily do that. They wait until I commit a crime.
I mean, I just don't know how you can, like, summon anger when it's just not a reaction in the moment. Like, I don't know how you do that. You're either faking it, right, or you're genuinely angry. But if you were angry a week ago about something kid did, and then you see them a week later, you're just no longer. That's just not how emotions work. So you could put it on to show them that they did something wrong, and that will be performative. But I mean, everyone try now. Just try and get angry when you're in a good mood. It's impossible. You can't just do that.
Well, I'll give you like an example. Your wife is cheating on you. Now you find this out. You know she's been in the hotel room with the guy. 2 weeks go by. Now you're in front of your wife. You have that connection. You have the time to say something to her. To say that anger or emotion isn't genuine or that you're somehow faking it, I just don't think that logic follows.
If you find out your wife's cheating and then you see her a week later, you've already gone through that shock, right, and that reaction in the moment. Now, you might talk to her about it and she might make you angry again by, like, denying it or something, right? So then you might get angry again. But once again, I just don't think you can fake. If you then go in and you start yelling and you're not really angry, you might be sad. You might have some other emotion, right? Once you've gone through the initial shock and anger, which is usually when you learn about the thing, not weeks later.
Yeah, I don't think that's how emotions work.
I think it's exactly how emotions work. I think they're reactions.
I don't think emotions are a linear event that once you experience it, that emotion can't come back. I think emotions are more fluid. You go through periods of anger in your life. You go through periods of long suffering. I think this is just a natural part of the process. I don't believe that, like, each anger episode is its own unique thing that's left to that particular juncture.
Well, I think it is. I think anger's like a physical. It's actually like physical thing that. I mean, that's another problem, of course, because anger is physical.
But I do have a comment that.
Hey, what the fuck, John? You're in the middle of a sentence. You have adrenaline coursing through you. Your heart rate rises, right? You can't even think straight. I mean, again, how can an immaterial being get his heart rate up? So he's like, so angry. I think with these words, it's obviously not sufficient, right? But I don't know. I mean, maybe other people can join in. I think that anger is a reaction to like something that happens in the moment. I don't think you can sustain anger over time, because eventually you're just not angry. You might be sad. You might have other emotions, right? But anger, no, I think it's an instant reaction.
No,
and
it's not.
It's physical. It's a physical. It's a physical phenomenon. So John's just going to say wrath is different to anger. He's going to like.
Yeah, he builds it up for the day of disaster. But that's not really what. Yeah.
So let me respond to Haiti real quick, John. But then we can let you go in. So when I'm looking at God, and I go back to the photo analogy, like we're giving a material representation of anger, but God is an immaterial being, which means that he cannot have anger in the identical same way as we do, but he can have anger comparable. So when God is explaining he's angry, or this is his wrath, or this is his love, we're quite obviously meaning a different kind of love and not an identical love.
Yeah, it's always different. It's always schmanga, right? It's never the actual thing. It's never the word. Maybe we just need a different word. Maybe we should stop saying he's got anger. Maybe we should stop saying he's got emotions. Maybe he has shmemotions or something. It always ends up in this place. It always ends up with, well, it's not exactly what we think it is. It's something else.
Well, that's the way. I mean, even like sciences work, when you're examining the scientific evidence and the data around you, like you see different things, you're describing them in different ways. Sometimes the word usage you're using isn't the best usage. It's not the one that you would prefer. But for that particular time, this is how you describe it, and then you describe it this way. And then eventually you're like, okay, well, this is the phenomenon. I can describe it this other way. I no longer have to put it in this limited scope. I think God is the same way as we conceptualize him, and we get more information.
I think, James, that like God knows the emotions that he's going to have, but that's not really the comment that that kind of triggered me, to be honest. I mean, I'm flabbergasted you said that God did not have to send his son. I'm very surprised at that. Do you actually think that because Adam fell, all of a sudden God decided to send his son? Is that what you believe?
Yeah, James has a more coherent view than you.
Yeah, I think John is running into some problems, because if you're saying that God created Adam, and you're implying that intentionality to the fall, where God was always going to send Jesus, which means
100%.
Which means that he caused Adam to fail, which means that God is not, and this is all the logical entailment, which means that God is not excused for what we typically as theists call the pervasion of the good, which is when God removes his hand. In this case, you're actively saying that it's not pervasion, it's just God's left hand is the good, God's right hand is the evil, and he does both.
Here's the thing, James. Even in the Arminian view, right, it is such a case that God foreknew that Adam would fail, right? Now, when you talk about God's providence, we look at 1 Peter 1, I'm just going to begin verse 19. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver and gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, the Lamb without blemish or defect.
Yeah, I'm going to get inside, try to pull up in the Wayne Grudem book, because even your view, John, isn't in line with the majority of Calvinist viewpoints.
Hey, did you mute me while I was reading, Daniel? I'm not going to put up with this, dude. In fact, was it you, Daniel?
No, it was not.
It wasn't me.
Okay. Well, in any case.
Oh, did you send Daniel?
I was reading. Yeah. So as I was reading, listen. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. And so God, when He created the world, James, planned and for Jesus to come to the world to save the world. He created the world with the purpose, and it's all over Scripture with the purpose of sending Christ. Now you could say, and let me just finish real quickly. You could say that God had the foreknowledge that Adam would sin in the Garden of Eden, but we as Calvinists believe something else. But in any case, God planned to send Christ. He always knew that He would, even before creating.
I'm saying, John, is that I don't think you're understanding my point, and I think that's why you're getting confused. I'm going to try to get to the Systematic Theology book by one of the top Calvinist thinkers so that I can lay this out for you. When you're looking at God and His created order of the world, there's not a necessity that God has to save anybody. If you are implying that God has to save people, then you are putting a limitation on God. You are implying that by saying God did not have the choice to send Jesus. When you take that away from God, you put yourself in a problem.
What I am saying is that before creation of the world, God planned to send Jesus, even before creating the world. That's written all over Scripture. When you look at the prophecies themselves, 350 prophecies of Christ.
You're just not listening to my point, John. It's like you're arguing against something that I'm not even saying. Once God decided to save some people, from that point, then Jesus was going to come. It was inevitable. But until God decided to save some people, Jesus was not cosmically obligated to have to come to save anyone.
My question is, when do you understand God deciding? That's the question.
And this is where you have the confusion on my part. I'm talking about before the creation of the material world, John.
Okay, so you do agree that God decided to send Jesus before creating, and once having created, He had to send Jesus. Do you agree?
I think James had to go inside or something. I think that's what he was saying.
Did James imply that God could be surprised? It seemed like that would be an indication of his conceptual.
Well, he said he had foreknowledge, so I don't know how he could possibly be surprised.
Yeah, but he said he didn't have knowledge of his own decisions until the decisions were made. Like the very idea that God makes decisions.
Yeah. Isn't that confusing?
Sort of yeah, that's definitely not like an orthodox conception of omniscience.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, I don't think you or John are paying attention to anything I'm saying today.
Well, I mean, admittedly, I came in partway through, so yeah, that tracks. I mean, I didn't hear a lot of what you said. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, hey, James, it's just a simple question to clear it up. Do you agree that God decided to send Jesus, and then He created the world? Do you agree?
Yeah, John, that's not in dispute. You just were confused on what I was saying. Are you saying from your perspective that God had no other choice but to send Jesus?
Once having created the world, yes, because that's what He decided to do.
That's not my question.
He's not going to go back. He's not going to go back.
That's not my question. Was God always obligated to save people?
Read it again?
I tell you what, Haiti, I'm very close to booting him out, and I don't care if you boot me out. If you're going to start muting me again.
I mean, I assume it was, I
don't mind if you bring him up, but if he's modded to the point where
you told me in the chat to mod him.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm not going to put up with this muting today. You can kick me out. I don't care. But if I don't know if it's Daz, I don't know if someone's fooling around. But I'm not going to put up.
Daz actually
funny how
said
he
in
says today, as if like him tapping out is some kind of unusual occurrence.
I want to say that with John Lee having the mod badge, you can tell his comments in the chat from the fake John Lee's comments.
I must have not been paying attention.
Yeah.
But Daniel also told me that he wasn't muting you, so...
Well, then don't mod him, and then we'll find out if I'm continuing to be muted.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, I'll bring it up.
Because if you look in the chat, you can always... That's how I can tell when John's mod versus the fake John Lee and the real John Lee.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry,
yeah, John, I wasn't even.
Yeah, I don't really care, Daniel. Just don't even talk to me. Don't even defend yourself, please.
I wasn't even at my phone. I wasn't even at the phone. I was sweeping.
Listen, if you're gonna defend yourself, I'm just gonna send you and kick you out of the room, dude. I'm just trying to move forward here, okay? You don't. If you didn't do it, fine. If you did not do it, fine.
Well, for heaven's sake, you sent me down twice. I have not done anything.
I just warned you. But yeah, anyway, James. Yeah, but anyway, James, if it's a case, James, that if you believe that that God decided to send Jesus before the creation of the world, once having created, because God does not go back on his plan, that he was forced to act according to what he already planned, that he must have sent Jesus to the world, then I have no problem with that. But if you believe otherwise...
John, I wouldn't word it like that because that's terrible wording in my opinion. When you're looking at God, God is not forced to do anything. So God's not like, oh darn, I decided to do this and now, I'm cosmically under handcuffs to do it. It's just, this is God's decision. He's not bound by anything other than himself.
Oh, wow.
Decides to do A. So you believe that once God decides to do something, like that he can't be, let's say that before he's actually started creating, he's contemplating. He contemplates to do this, but he decides to do this instead, looking at possible worlds. You're saying that God is obligated to actualize all possible worlds, John?
Yeah, God is not a human being that he should change his mind. When we look at the covenant that he had with Abraham, he himself went through the animals. He does not go back on his promises. He does not go back on his plan. And he's immutable in that way. And so for yes, absolutely, he's bound to his own word.
You don't remember 100%. You don't remember like God as he's playing out creation and he's giving them that I'm going to wipe out the city of Nineveh, let them know it's coming. The prophet goes and gets a seat on a hill because he wants to see the fireworks. They repent and God withdraws his wrath. God is talking to Moses. Moses talks to God, and God withdraws his wrath and doesn't, wipe out the Israelites right there. You have in the Old Testament as well, in Genesis, where Abraham is talking to God, Will you wipe out the city if there's 100 good people? What about all the way down?
Yeah, every single example that you gave, God did not change his mind. When he sent Jonah to the Ninevites, he already had planned to forgive them. There was never a point at which he did not plan. In fact, he was so adamant to honor his plan to forgive the Ninevites that he swallowed up Jonah, and even Jonah's unwillingness did not stop God's plan.
So, from your vantage point, John.
Well, hang on one sec. I'm sorry.
I just
James
asked John if he thought that then God had to lie to the people to get them.
No, but earlier we were talking about omniscience, and you said that God couldn't be omniscient about his emotions. But now you're kind of saying that God can't even be omniscient about what people are going to do.
What are you? You're going down a completely.
No. You just said that people repented and God changed his plans. So how would he have not known that they were going to change their plans?
You're completely missing my point. God knew how this was going to play out, and he knew how the situation's going to happen. He knew that he's going to be talking to Abraham. He knew that this is going to unfold. I don't see any problem with that at all.
So you were saying that God knew he was going to change his mind, James?
I'm just asking from John's vantage point if he's saying that God had to lie to Moses, had to lie
to the
city of Nineveh, and had to lie to Abraham to get them to do what he wants.
Yeah, he did not lie. We can go over scripture to show you exactly.
Then why would he tell them he's going to do A and then not do A?
He didn't say that. That's what I'm saying.
So he didn't say he was going to destroy the city of Nineveh?
If they did not repent, he would. That was the conditional.
Yeah, those are conditional statements.
When you're looking at that, he says he's going to wipe out the city. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'll go back and read the story, but I don't think it says if you repent. It says I'm going to wipe out the city, my judgment is coming. Then God saw them shaving their heads and their repentance, and he had mercy on them. But I don't think that he made a conditional statement. I don't think that's even how that text reads.
Yeah, that's a mess, James.
So in other words, God sent Jonah, literally forced him to preach to the Ninevites so that he could just go back on him, change his mind, of which you're claiming that God foreknew that he would change his mind now? Is this where we're at?
See, this is why it's difficult to talk to you, John, because you don't understand what I'm saying, and we're talking past each other, and it's because I'm trying to convey deep thoughts in a simplistic way that even I'm learning from the systematic theology book I'm reading, and you're using dad bod theology, and you just don't have a point of reference.
Was that an answer to my question?
That's a statement of where we're at.
Omniscient.
I'm asking you if you're claiming that God changed his mind. I find that a ridiculous notion. However, let's go with that. Let's assume that God changed his mind. My question to you is, did God foreknow that he would change his mind?
How does
that do? Of course.
He's omniscient.
Of course, Sean. Exactly. That's
okay, so focus on that.
The thing is that he's not following where I am going, Sean. He's assuming that I'm saying that God is changing his mind in the moment, and that somehow I'm arguing for open theism. I'm not, but I'm trying to convey a deeper subject to John. And two things are happening. One, I might not be doing a good job explaining what I'm learning in the systematic theology, and John's got 30 years of dad bod theology, and it's a hot mess on the stage right now.
That's not an answer.
How does God change his mind if he's
crickets?
Because if God isn't omniscient, none of this other shit even matters.
I'm conveying that John is not changing.
Now what final Pepsi up?
God is not changing his mind in the way that John is trying to imply that I'm saying it in this conversation. And I'm saying that I'm trying to convey in a simplistic way what I've been learning in these books, and I'm trying to convey to John, but he's filtering it through dad bod theology, and I am admitting that I'm probably not doing a good job explaining the concepts in a simple way.
The simple answer, Sean, is God does not change his mind. That's a simple answer.
Jesus Christ. Pineapple Pepsi up.
Now, I'm very surprised that James is even saying that God changes his mind. And then he gave the examples where actually, if you look at those examples, God's mind was not even changed there, that he assumes that.
I agree with you, but people have their hands raised, so other people want to contribute to the conversation. So as a moderator, can you add people to the conversation so we don't have to listen to just you and James droning on?
Yeah, I don't have hands. I don't see any hands, Sean.
There are plenty of people involved in the conversation.
I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah, Darth Arianis just raised his hand. I brought him.
I understand, but I'm talking to you.
Shut the fuck up, Mo. Shut the fuck up, Mo.
And I'm looking in my systematic theology, because like I said, as I was jokingly mocking John's developed theology, and I'm explaining mine, I'm trying to explain this concept that I'm deriving from the systematic theology book that I'm reading, and quite obviously, John and I are talking past each other in a very messy way on stage right now.
Why don't you stop talking past each other then?
Well, it seems to me that you're suggesting that God can change his mind. Can you clear that up?
Yeah, so I don't believe in that moment that God is changing his mind. I don't believe in that conceptual way. But as God is playing out and he's seeing how these events are coming, he knows what he's going to do in these situations, and he knows what he needs to say to get the desired outcome that he has.
Yeah. Hey, James, I have a famous verse, Numbers 23:19. It says, God is not human, that he should lie, not a human being, that he should change his mind. Does he not speak and then not act? Does he not promise and not fulfill? I mean, surely you agree with those verses, right? That verse.
See, John, I feel like you just didn't hear anything that I'm saying. And so it tells me that I'm not sure if you want to right now.
I think when you're saying this sort of confusing, it seems that you're saying that God can't change his mind, but I'm confused as to why you brought up like Jonah and Abraham and all those, when God clearly planned for the salvation of those cities. I mean, he never intended to destroy them.
That's my point, Mo.
Sort of confused. Can you clear that up for us?
I mean, let's not.
But the God of the Bible clearly is not omniscient. He changes his mind all the time. He gets surprised all the time. He was surprised by where Adam was when he was walking around in the garden, right?
Just because he asked where he was.
The point is, if we ignore what the Bible literally says and take some like bullshit theological reading that's the mainstream, that God is omniscient, and then God can't change his mind, and all of that turns him into metaphor. So, James, how does God change his mind, whether it's in the moment? Well, what does it mean to change your mind not in the moment?
Okay, Sean's not tracking again. Obviously, James
shut up, Mo. 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 Shut up, Mo.
What you meant by bringing
Shut up, Mo.
We gotta hear Mo speaking. We can't hear him.
Shut up, Rashad. Shut up, Rashad. Shut up, Rashad.
So is there not going to be moderation in this room?
Well, Rashad is not one to talk.
Hang on, can you answer Sean's question? Sean asked James a question. James, can you? Everyone
right, he talked over me. He talked over my question to ask his question.
Shut up, Mo. Shut up, Mo. Shut up, Mo.
Give me about 10 minutes. Doctors don't have paperwork they need, so I need to call another doctor.
All right. Okay, so James is taking a...
Thanks for tapping me out.
I'm still deeply confused how an omniscient God can either change his mind or react emotionally to things, but James can't explain it. Ow!
Kitty, Haiti, it's obvious that they're not going to explain it, but what I'm interested in is Rashad going to respond to my objection and not going to run away?
No. Yeah, it's not a mind, Rashad.
Obviously, he thinks that God isn't a mind. He said he would.
Obviously, Sean is not tracking again. That's not his objection, Sean.
So
do you know his objection?
No,
if
Sean,
you don't, just let him render the objection.
I'll handle this. So, Rashad, you want to be an agnostic on whether or not God is a mind, correct?
What do you mean by mind? I can't be agnostic if I don't understand what you mean by.
What do you mean by mind?
Sean, a mind is an entity that possesses intentional states such as desires, beliefs, goals.
Yeah, I don't know how this would map to God if you say God has desires. Well, when we speak about God's desires, we're not speaking about them in relation to human desires.
Okay, great. So you want to withhold judgment on it, correct?
Well, what did I just say, Darth?
Okay, so you want to say that he isn't a mind.
Did I say that?
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, but I just responded to you, and instead of engaging with my response,
don't play this game with me.
You resorted back to what you think the position is.
Okay, so you don't.
All right, so Darth, I'm not going to do this again with you. No one's going to mod this, so I'm not going to do this again with you.
Okay, so you don't want to attribute that.
I had a question for whoever presented the omniscience paradox in this article.
Rashad, stop talking. So you don't want to attribute that to God. You say
I
that
said
God
I'm not going to do this with you, Darth. You're wasting my time.
You say
and I'm
that
not going to engage someone who's a racist.
You
right?
say
Unless you apologize for your racism. I have nothing further to say.
Shut.
Yeah, Rashad, you want to make the stupid claim.
I said what I said about this, so we can move on, or we can.
Rashad said he's not going to engage with you.
So let Darth make his point. Then he's done engaging. So let Darth finish the conversation.
You want to make.
What was the conversation that he's going to finish?
Rashad, you said you were done. You tapped out. It's Darth's turn.
You want to make the stupid claim that
what
God
was the conversation that he's going to finish?
You want to make the stupid claim that God is not a mind, but nevertheless you.
Those are not. That's not my claim. So you're wasting time by reassessing something that I didn't state.
You said that God doesn't fit in that category.
That's not what I said.
I defined it.
That's why I'm saying you're having difficulty listening.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
This is a you problem. So don't say anything else about what I said. Otherwise, I'm going to have to clarify.
You don't have anything informative to say. So
then don't ask me any more questions, right?
Now that we understand that under your view, God is not a mind.
That's not my view.
You then want to attribute the mental property of omniscience to God. And I'm saying that that's a contradiction. So are you going to respond to that or not?
That's obvious, right? Like, how can God be omniscient if God is not a mind? Or if he doesn't have a mind or whatever?
Presumably you think that God doesn't have beliefs. But nevertheless, you want to say that God knows all true propositions. Do you take knowledge to be a justified true belief, Rashad?
You know, Sean, one of the things that Gigi brought up was like a computer having all the data and not being a mind and still having all that information. That was just one thing proposed as a possibility to understand information, accurate information without being a mind.
Jelly, shut the fuck up.
That's hilarious, Sean. That's hilarious.
So I'm waiting. Oh, look, he left.
Well, I mean, hilarious is not a really good, cogent response.
Hysterical.
It's rich as fuck coming from John Lee.
Yeah, now, I'm not claiming that God is not a mind you, right? Bible scripture is clear that God has a mind. But I'm just saying, from that perspective, that's a possibility.
Somebody should explain to John that Syntax is not semantics.
But Jack, he doesn't understand what that means.
Yeah,
You're forgetting.
Somebody should explain that.
What are we explaining, John?
So, is this going to be the topic for the next few days? I think it's very interesting, you know, the about whether God can possibly be omniscient. I think that's a good topic.
Yeah, for anybody other than you.
What's already been defeated by, well, you and James have already been beat on it. And Rashad, so what the fuck? What's there to talk about?
I haven't even been engaged on it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you have. Does God have propositional knowledge?
Yeah, that's a funny thing that you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say. Oh, I meant today was the context, Jack. I realized what conversation.
That's okay.
Is being referenced. Okay. But I don't recall having any problems in that conversation. Maybe you can remind everyone, Jack.
Jesus.
No, seriously. I don't remember any problems in that conversation.
You have to give me a few minutes. I have to take a
Just because I didn't say that, I said that God didn't have beliefs and justification or something like that. I think I don't think that was problematic.
I mean, if any.
And I put evil in the book, and I write a story, and it involves evil. Does that make me evil for writing evil in the book?
What's that got to do with being an omniscient mind?
So if an omniscient mind is able to produce a reality, I'm suggesting an analogy to an author that writes a book.
What we're trying to figure out is it even logically possible for a mind to be omniscient? That's what we're trying to figure out. We're not talking about the problem of evil right now.
Okay, but I think it may apply. So like you'd be omniscient to a story, right? Like if you knew the story before you write it down, you'd be omniscient to a story. Let's say story is an analogy for your experience of reality, right? So like if you're a character in this story, because I just wrote a book with characters in it, and I write for the characters, and I write the characters, doesn't that put me in a position where like I can essentially view people with free will and have them do evil things, and I'm not evil as that happens?
No one said what you. It's got nothing to do with whether God's evil or not. Okay? Look. Let me explain what the problem is, Pat. Okay, the problem is this: if you're omniscient, you know what's going to happen, so you're not going to be surprised by it, and yet you seem to get angry about it. Right? That's one problem. Here's another problem. Can you change your mind if you're omniscient? James thinks you can. John thinks you can't. I think John's probably right about that. If you know everything, what does it mean to make a choice? What does it mean to deliberate between two options? You can't do it.
Yeah, you guys
so
are
does that mean you're not...
what I've said. I'll have to try to come back
all right, fair enough, James. I'm just trying to explain it to Pat because he doesn't seem to understand the problem we're wrestling with. Agents deliberate between choices and take action. How do you do that if you're omniscient? What does it mean to think, well, which of these two options would be the best action to take? Right? These are some of the problems with an omniscient mind. That's what we're trying to talk about.
Yeah. The simple answer is there are no deliberations.
Well, I think you would have to say that, right? But then what kind
I do say that.
Then yeah, and then you also say God's not an agent. But you do also say God gets angry, which is, bizarre. But
every time in the Bible. Were you going to finish, Eddie?
I want to just clarify with Pat that he understands problem we're wrestling with. Okay.
I'm just saying, every time we see in the Bible where God gets angry, he stores that wrath. In other words, it builds and builds and builds, and then there's that day of disaster, the day of wrath, and that's how the wrath of God is usually described consistently throughout Scripture. It's not that he's surprised, and all of a sudden he just gets angry and shakes his fist.
Well, there are examples of that too, though.
Where?
I can offer, forgive me, I can offer like a position where it's applicable. So if I write a book and I like the story that I wrote, and sometimes I read the story, maybe it'll give me an emotional response. Is that fair?
No. You write a book, you know exactly what's going to happen. Are you surprised at the sad ending? Did you forget you wrote it?
If I'm omniscient, do I have the capacity to do that?
Of course not.
Okay.
So,
okay, that's fair.
Analogy.
Okay. I'm just suggesting that the story that I wrote, right, would be all-encompassing reality, physics, math, everything all at once, including metaphysics, right? Like, I think there should be room for special pleading if this author writes this story that actually contains all those things.
I don't know what you mean. Did you understand the problem of omniscience? Because you stick into this writing a book idea. Omniscience is more like knowing the contents of every book that was ever written, knowing the contents of every atom in the universe. That's omniscience. I think it's about foreknowledge, maybe, or like predetermination, or some other concept we're not actually discussing.
Forgive me if it's not related, then it's not. But I thought it would be related that an omniscient mind could be described or analogous to an author that writes a story, and that story would be an analogy for all of existence, metaphysics, physics, also, if you're a character in that...
When I first heard the message of the gospel as a non-Christian high school student,
it would be written down by that author, and that's how it happens, and that's the only way you know to know it.
Right, and can you change your mind about what happens in the story?
I don't see why not.
You've already written the book in your analogy.
Sure. Right.
So how can you change your mind? You've already written the book.
How do you change your mind? I suppose you could write another book, or you could actually like think to yourself, I should have written that differently. But that wouldn't necessarily be a part of the book that was already written, right?
How could an omniscient mind have that thought? I should have done something differently. How could they think that?
Well, inside of the book that's already written, it wouldn't be possible, right? But outside of that book, maybe.
If you know everything, how can you possibly make a mistake and say, I should have done something differently? Exactly.
Well, the book's already written, so there's no mistakes in the book, right?
Can you answer my question? Forget the book. If you know everything, how can you possibly make a mistake? Let alone, the other claim is God's infallible. He doesn't make mistakes.
Sure, but like if my book, right? I don't need to think that my book is bad.
Oh my God!
I don't need to think.
I can't. No. Sorry, it's a waste.
I don't think half of these problems would occur if deists didn't have their own vocabulary when it comes to these terms, like choice and mind and deliberation and all these different words that have to mean something different when it comes to their God. It has to.
Don't pretend like science and philosophy does not use certain definitions And that
don't compare science and philosophy to your fantasy book,
and that you and an atheist don't use different definitions colloquially. Their words have different meaning and different usage depending on the context, and you crying about it doesn't help.
It's a question.
Except that y'all are trying to say that you're speaking analogically about that these are analogical descriptions, except when pressed, you often are unable to come up with the common properties between these analogies. You can't figure out what you're actually talking about. So, like, yeah, you can say that, well, I'm using definition, or I'm using usage number 4 for mind or whatever, but, like, you know, but you also want to, at the same time, compare it to, you know, to compare it to, you know, the actual minds and stuff that we know. So, I mean, you can't really have it both ways if you're going to just decide that, well, I'm not using the word cool to mean a temperature, I'm using the word cool to mean, like, great or neat.
So you're not even in the same ball field. When you use examples, of course examples are going to compare something similar. There's no problem in that. It's done every day, all day in philosophy. The only issue is when you have an atheist who uses the term atheist like an agnostic, crying about theists not using words properly.
Well, another example, James, another example would be...
That was a whole lot of hand-waving.
Mind. Garth gave the definition of a mind a while ago, but my first thought when he gave the definition of a mind, desires and intentions, how does that apply to animal minds? We're told animals have minds, but do they have the same desires and intentions and things of that nature? So
they still have a
I
level,
would wonder how we draw the distinction.
Some of them still have beliefs. It's just that they don't have second order beliefs.
Yeah, a dog will believe that their water bowl or food bowl is full at a certain time.
Coco, no.
A dog like desires and intentions of a sheep or a dog or something like that they could change their mind and evaluate and reason.
They don't have that kind of level of capacity. They don't have that type of rational capacity, but that doesn't take away beliefs or intentions.
Well, that's the thing. There's obviously a distinction between their minds and the human mind. And then there's a distinction between the human mind and God's mind, right?
They're still under the category of a mind.
Yeah, but they're not under the category of a mind as we think.
Great. So
right?
just explain the difference between our mind and God's mind.
I don't know. I couldn't explain that. I don't know.
Omniscience would be one.
Yeah, there's one difference.
If God, you have omniscience.
That's what we're trying to figure out. How a mind is omniscient. We're not trying to and work from there. The claim, hold on, John. John, just one sec. The claim is that this mind is omniscient. That's what we're trying to figure out how that could be, right? So just saying, well, the difference is it's omniscient. You're just repeating.
Yeah, I mean, when you have omniscience, you don't have propositional attitudes in a sense.
So define omniscience then.
Omniscience is understanding our true proposition of awareness.
So don't you...
Is it just me or is John breaking up really bad?
Yeah, he's breaking up. So there are propositions. It's just there isn't a propositional attitude to whether they're true. But that doesn't really help telling us what. So what is the relation between God's mind and proposition?
Well, God has decades true proposition.
Yeah, unfortunately,
that's something God does. That's not what his mind is.
I understand. So because he has the foreknowledge and the omnipotence, he understands.
No, focus here. Focus. We're talking about omniscience.
Yes, I am talking about omniscience.
No, you're bringing in omnipotence. Just think about omniscience. How does God have omniscience?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He has the power to affect all reality, and therefore, because he does, he has the foreknowledge and the omniscience. That's what I'm trying to say. It is not that he learns something, he makes it happen.
Is that an ongoing project?
Yeah, God's omnipotence establishes what God knows.
Do you mean, did you understand what I meant when I said, is that an ongoing project?
As far as I know, it's an eternal.
So, he is literally kind of whirring away, creating every blade of grass, every movement of every butterfly's wing, etc., etc.
The way I look at it, it's already pre-programmed, and it's just plain.
It doesn't follow from the fact that one makes things happen that one would know that one is doing that.
I bet he's using the word "know" completely different between God and himself in his sentences.
Of course. That's what James said earlier, right? When you have, let's say, theory, right, or evidence or something, even in science and philosophy, they don't use it the same way, right? So if you, no. I'll give you an example. If you have a scientific theory, right, and you have a conspiracy theory, those two words theory are used in a way that are not synonymous.
Yeah, but they can both be explained.
That's what I'm trying to tell. And so when SH5 says,
explained.
All I'm saying is when he says that I have a different idea of God's mind as a human mind, I said, of course.
Well, I said knowledge, so like I would love to love for you to explain the difference. What's God's knowledge compared to human knowledge? What's the definition?
Well, you mean the similarities? Is that what you're asking for? The analogous property?
I mean, I think that that would probably overlap if you just give the full explanations of both.
Well, I mean, there are various theories of knowledge and philosophy. I would hold to
Can't hear you.
Robots.
What's interesting about what John just said is that, if I'm understanding him right, sans creation, God sort of plans out every butterfly flapping its wings.
Every blade of grass.
Hang on, I hadn't every blade of grass, right? And yet he still thinks he's not a determinist.
I am a determinist. A soft determinist.
Right, so you're a determinist for everybody but humans?
A soft determinist.
He can't get hard anymore.
Makes sense because... Wait a minute. I've lost again. So you're a determinist for everything in nature, say, but not everything humans do.
No, I'm a determinist, period.
Okay. What does
determinism apply across the board?
That's not what he said before.
Yeah, I'm really confused.
He said that God has libertarian free will. Although it seems to only apply to one choice.
Yeah, he has free will until he does.
Now, the context of determinism has not in terms of necessitarianism. I'm talking about determinism as pertaining to the created order of things. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and we've already been through this. You're a partial necessitarian in that once God decided to create, there was only one possible creation. There's only one possible world, right? Which goes along nicely with your determinism.